can start. Your Excellencies, Honorable Cabinet Ministers in Bhutan, Members of Parliament in Bhutan, dear Dr. Emela Hartz, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, dear colleagues. It is my privilege to open this online event also on behalf of my colleagues. My name is Mike Schnier, and as the Program Executive of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, it is my honor to welcome you to participate in an online event titled Role of Women in Modern Bhutanese Society. The Friedrich Naumann Foundation is a German political foundation that promotes liberal values, working in areas of good governance, rules of law, education, and freedom market economy. We achieve our goals by political consultancy, political dialogues, and civic education. Since the beginning of this year, our office in New Delhi, which is part of the FNF regional office in South Asia, has been exploring the possibility to start activities in Bhutan. We started by organizing a webinar on liberty and happiness in Bhutan, for which we got overwhelming response, and this motivated us. We are pleased to share that we already have identified a partner in Bhutan, and we are supporting them on activities to promote active citizenship and good governance. Bhutan has been a prime example of how good governance can form the backbone of democracy if nurtured deftly in a global world. Through good leadership and foresight, Bhutan has carved out an exemplary approach to development. Germany and Bhutan has been pursuing relations for several years, even in the absence of diplomatic relations. Germany has been supporting Bhutan from the European Union, and it's the largest contributor to its union budget. People-to-people contact between Bhutan and Germany also increased over the years. However, recently, from last year in November 2020, both the countries announced on diplomatic relations. With the establishment of diplomatic relations, the two ambassadors expresses the desire for further deepen the friendship and cooperation between the two countries. Bhutan's program is largely informed by the Buddhist philosophy of seeking the right causes and conditions that give rise to happiness. This was encapsulated in gross national happiness. Women in Bhutan enjoy a better status in the society and are actively contributing to the economy in present days by taking up various roles in different sectors. Today's session will focus on the role of women in modern Bhutanese society and how, through their multitasking skills, have become exceptional leaders in their respective fields. We anticipate that by this online event, Friedrich Naumann Foundation will enhance the visibility of Bhutan within Germany and among the German public. My sincere thanks to our panelists, Ms. Aung Sonam Wangmo, also to Aung Panchok Chodan and Chering Dolka for agreeing to be part of this panel. We are all delighted to have you here and to know your views from your experience. Thank you also to Namgai Sam for agreeing to moderate the sessions. I would like to make a special mention and thanks to Mr. Reinhard Wolf from the German Bhutan Himalaya Society based out of Germany for this special support and giving his insights on Bhutan, as well as supporting us in communicating the event to a wider range. It is now my pleasure to hand over the microphone to the Vice President of the German Bhutan Himalaya Society, Dr. Emela Hartz. Ms. Hartz has lived in Bhutan for many years, knows this country very well, and leads the organization as a Vice President. The German Bhutan Himalaya Society has been working for Bhutan since 1984. Their office is based out of Cologne in Germany. This organization is one of the oldest friendship societies for Bhutan. The main objective of this organization is to create mutual understanding and to know each other better. They are supporting guests from Bhutan for various lectures and information events, exhibition, study tours in support of the previous Bhutan's historical heritage. Dear Ms. Hartz, we are now looking forward to your address, and over to you.
A very warm welcome to everybody. I'm very happy that I'm now today speaking to so many people who I met already in Bhutan or who I have known for many years, who I'm a friend with. I represent today the German Bhutan Himalaya Society. And as we have already learned, this is a group of 150 people who are headed by a voluntary board of professionals. The president of our society, Mr. Reinhard Wolf, he is by profession a forester, and he has worked throughout his professional life in many countries of the globe, including African countries, but also in Asia and in Bhutan. He has worked for 5 years in Lovesa in a social forestry project. We have on our board Herbert Küster. He is a very experienced former administrator in many ministries of the German government. And he has a profound knowledge of democratic institutions and democratic processes. We have on board a woman who looks after our finances, Brigitte Eisenach. She has done a wonderful job in sort of channeling funds from Germany to Bhutan and looking after the finances of our society. And I myself, I'm an agriculturist. I have worked for many years in the area of traditional medicine, and I have lived and worked in Bhutan for 17 years. I have two children, 2 boys, who are both born and raised in Bhutan. So I sort of represent this world citizenship. You know, we have lived in Asia and we live now in Europe. So I have met many people, many in Bhutan, and of course many women. I would like to mention also that the German Bhutan Himalaya Society has a very good network, and we are very proud to say that we have good connections to the Bhutanese embassy in Brussels. So this network and the support this diplomatic support from the embassy in Brussels helps us to really carry out projects in Bhutan. So, back to our subject of today, the women of Bhutan. As we have already heard, women have a very high sort of status in Bhutan, higher than in other Asian countries and then in other countries of the world even. So I remember one very strong woman, which is Dasho Dawadum. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she was honored by the 3rd king of Bhutan as the first Ramjang, that is sort of like an executive chief of a ministry. And she has founded back in the 1980s, I think, the National Women Association of Bhutan. So I have known her personally, and I think she was one of the very strong women of Bhutan. I have also met Neten Sangmo, who has led the Anti-Corruption Commission of Bhutan. She has fought very fierce battles against a lot of things which did not go so well in Bhutan. And she is one of the very strong women who was awarded the sword by the 4th king of Bhutan. She is a Dasho. So Dasho Dawadum and Amneten Sangmo both are very, very strong women who are sort of demonstrate what positions women can have in Bhutan. But of course, not everybody has such a high position, and not many women are involved in politics of modern Bhutan. Most women are, as all over the world, housewives, farmers, entrepreneurs, and women need to work a lot. You know, they are multitasking all the time. They have to educate the children, they have to look after the income of the family. And it's definitely not an easy life, you know. And I think the women have difficulties, especially when we consider that the rural-urban migration is very high in Bhutan. many rural families leave their farms and move into the towns. And that is the moment where the old traditions of living together, many generations living in one house, break apart. And I see most of the problems coming from that situation, that not grandma and grandma are looking after the children anymore, because in a small little flat in the town, it's not possible to live with 2 or 3 or 4 generations under one roof. So I think the modern society is facing problems in regard to the situation of women. And I think this seminar is one way of trying to address this situation and maybe finding solutions also. I'm absolutely certain that women in Bhutan are so strong, they will overcome these difficulties, and with sufficient support from the government, I'm sure that that will be a new step into the future. I think we will have very interesting speakers today in the evening, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. And I wish this event a very good outcome. Tashi Delek.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Hartz, for your greetings, for your address, and for your interesting introduction. Before we start the panel discussion, I would like to take you to a trip to Bhutan, although not really virtual. So here is a less than 2-minute short video. This footage depicts life in Bhutan from a baby, a girl, a mother, a farmer, nurse, security, and professional. It strings a thread on many lifespans of women from a young age till she grows old, touching lives and nature around her and contributing the best way she can. The song is broadly about the connectivity of lives and how we should respect the past and our parents to create harmony in the future. This video is produced by Chongling. Chongling is a self-taught cinematographer, editor, and photographer. He has edited short films like The Red Door and worked as a line producer from the critically acclaimed feature film The Red Phallus. He is also a founder of Zoom Out Productions, a multimedia productions based in Thimphu in Bhutan. So Marco, please film up. Yeah, what for impressive pictures, which now brings us to our next item on the program. It is now my pleasure to open the discussion and give the microphone over to Namgai Sam, who will guide us through the evening. Let me briefly, before I do that, introduce Ms. Sam with a few words. Namgai Sam is the Executive Director of the Journalists Association of Bhutan, a non-political and non-profit organization with overarching mandates to promote professionalism in journalism, uphold freedom of expression, protect and promote the right to information, and protect journalism from hazards such as threats, harassments, legislation, etc. Ms. Sam is an independent journalist with more than a decade experience in all forms of media. She's a trainer and consultant for media and gender issues. She's a mental health advocate and also LGBTIQ ally as well. She is also a young Asian leader and a Fulbright Humphrey Fellow. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the discussion is in the best hands. Dear Ms. Sam, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike. I do hope it's in the best hands. I do aspire to be in the best hands and in the best mouth tonight. Thank you so much for having this panel, Frederick Naumann Foundation. I think it's such a wonderful platform, especially for the women who are on the panel. It's such a pleasure and a privilege of mine to be able to moderate this panel of women that I admire deeply and respect as well. Before I start, I would like to introduce our panelists. I'm sure some of you may have already seen the bios. If you haven't, I will just run through it in no particular order. So we have Sonamongmo, and basically it's out of respect, and she's older than me. It's not really a title, but we refer to somebody older as So Sonamongmo is a business person and social worker who's she has worked in the tourism industry for decades and is involved in various social enterprises and charity projects in Bhutan. She is deeply dedicated to supporting rural communities and supports local operations with her vast experience and large network. She is also the founder of Udruk, among the earliest companies in the country to provide travel-related services. Udruk was established in the year 1985. That is the year of my birth. So Sonam has been around for a lot of, for many years, and a lot of experiences to share, as you will see tonight on the panel. Second on the panel is Phinsok Choden. She's a HomeNet South Asia board member as a gender consultant with extensive national, regional, international experience in development. She's actively engaged in the area of women's empowerment with a particular focus on economic and political empowerment. In her role as the head of BNU, Bhutan Network for Empowering Women, a civil society organization that empowers women in order to mobilize, motivate, and facilitate women's participation in all forums of development and governance, she travels and meets rural women in all nooks and corners of Bhutan. She is also the honorary consul of the Netherlands in Bhutan. We finally have Amstring Dolkar. She is the executive director of Renew, which stands for Respect, Educate, Nurture, and Empower Women. So Renew is founded by Her Majesty the Queen Mother Sangye Chodron Wangchuk in the year 2004. It is a non-profit organization which works on empowering survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence by enabling them to be financially sustainable and emotionally independent individuals towards a socially productive member of society. She brings with her 26 years of experience working in the social sector. She started her career with the Ministry of Education in 1992 and gradually started working for Renew since 2004. And I have worked with both Amstring as well as Phinsok. I think that will come out as we talk in the panel. I haven't had a chance to work with Sonamongmo, but I've heard such great things about her, and there are so many great things to share about her tonight as well. Just some housekeeping before we start the panel. We're going to have at least 2 to 3 questions for every panelist. After that, we'll open up for questions. Then we will return to the panel again and to my questions. If there aren't questions, we will continue as a Q&A on the panel. But feel free to send in your questions even while we are speaking, and then we'll take in questions in between so that everybody's engaged and not feeling left out. And if you're joining from Bhutan, it's pretty late. South Asia, it's quite late, and not too late in Germany and in other parts of the world in the West. So do feel free to send in the questions, and we'll take them in as we go on with our panel discussion. So I'm returning to our topic of discussion for tonight, role of women in modern Bhutanese society. Well, we are a society in transition, so even our roles as women, men, and other genders are in transition too. While not all transitions are smooth, in the Bhutanese context, most of it has been gradual and orderly. There hasn't been much disruption. I would be echoing the sentiments of many Bhutanese women that it is only due to the far-sighted leadership of our kings that Bhutanese women have come this far. Even before the SDGs underscored gender equality, it was a priority in our development goals. Upon royal command, the National Commission for Women and Children was established. Women leaders are appointed to eminent positions in parliament and at executive levels, all under royal leadership as well. The appointment of female eminent members to parliament is particularly dear to me and to Amphinsok because there were barely any elected women at the time, and I'm sure Amphinsok will have so much more to share on this. Bhutanese women enjoy far greater social and legal status than our South Asian counterparts, as we've heard before from Dr. Armala. While we enjoy this status, but thanks to being a matrilineal society, and also unlike in other parts of South Asia, the husband usually moves into the wife's home and not vice versa. Opening up to the world has had both its pros and cons. While some parts of our minds have broadened, some parts have narrowed, sadly. Bhutan was never colonized, but we've inherited a colonial legislature and a little bit of the mindset, mostly from our good friend and neighbor, India, where men are placed front and center in all of this. Yes, there have been some losses, but the gains have been immense. Before modern education, women were not educated. Only boys were educated in the monasteries. The first king of Bhutan introduced modern education in the early 1900s. There are hilarious anecdotes of parents hiding their daughters from officials under large bamboo baskets to not send them to school when modern education first began. Officials would visit families door to door to ask that children be sent to schools. Incredible to think how far we've come in the last 100 years. I remember a teacher of mine telling me this when I was in the 8th standard. I was studying in Bhutan at that time. The rest of the world learned to crawl, walk, cycle, drive, and then fly. But for Bhutan, we leapt from crawling to driving and flying. Development and growth have happened by leaps and bounds. Bhutan will be graduating from being a least developed country in 2023 as well. For the uninitiated, education and healthcare are universal in Bhutan. In modern Bhutan, we have women topping important exams. We have female space engineers. One of them you saw in the video just a while earlier. She was speaking, she was standing at a podium. We have coders. We have women powering the civil society sector. You will see what I mean when our panelists begin speaking. We have a woman leading the health ministry. Our health minister has worked hard to ensure we've had only 2 deaths from COVID-19 till date and live in a virtually pandemic-free country, knock on wood. Women have made their mark and continue to trailblaze in various sectors. Our panelists today will not only bear testimony to this, but are real-life examples. I wish I could say the same. I wish I could say the situation is the same for women in media, but it is not as rosy. Male journalists outnumber women journalists by 3 times. JAB's last record tells us we have 92 male journalists and 30 female journalists. This gender imbalance reflects in the leadership too. Our media is young compared to elsewhere in the world. The oldest media, our national newspaper, Quinsel, is only a little over 5 decades old. Despite it being young, we haven't been as progressive in recognizing female leadership, even when there is the potential. The national newspaper Quinsel had its first female chief editor in 2018. The national broadcaster BBS has still not seen a female newsroom chief, but it did have a female managing director in 2008. As you can see, there have been great strides in some areas and baby steps in others. What can be said, though, is there's been movement forward. We have women and girls changing the face of Bhutanese women and modern Bhutanese society for the better. Allow me to invite our first speaker, Amphinsok Choden, to share her thoughts on the evolution of Bhutanese women and our roles in the public sphere with particular focus on governance and democracy. Amphinsok.
I think that was a beautiful, introduction to our country and the situation of women. I think actually you've covered a lot. So I will also try to do my best. Basically, I think I want to start with a quote, from Madame Madeleine Albright, whom all of us know and heard about, the first female Secretary of State in the history of the United States, she once said that success without democracy is improbable. Democracy without women is impossible. So let me also try to, shed some light on the evolving situation of women in our young democratic kingdom a bit more generally, and also touch on the specifics, I think, of women in politics. Nambi has already actually touched a lot on the general part, so I probably will zoom in much more on the specifics. Basically, Bhutan, I think, as already introduced by the former, speakers like Dr. Irmila and then the video, and also by Namgye. We are basically a very, living in a very young kingdom that has survived, deep in the folds and embrace of the mighty Himalayas, landlocked, isolated, and yet shaped our, destiny and emerged to carve out our own unique identity on the global stage, thanks, I think, largely to our enlightened and visionary kings, starting from the first king onwards, and today we are with the fifth king. Despite our, very small physical presence and very insignificant economic contribution to the world, I think we are still standing out, as a proud nation. And parliamentary democracy was introduced in this country in the year 2008, not, again, unlike in other countries, not by a grassroots level revolution, but from the top down as a gift from the golden throne to empower citizens to further shape our future and strengthen the country. Because our kings, decided that it is the right moment, and although people were still not yet enlightened enough, our kings were, so they decided to, shower this gift on us. We are still adjusting to this new system of governance, and of course, our democratic culture, along with the deeper awareness and consciousness that comes along with introduction of democracy, is still in transition, if I may say so, as Namgye also said it. At least I think when it concerns, I think, the role of women within the bigger picture of democracy in Bhutan, it is definitely still in transition. It's really work in progress, as you will see and you've heard already. After 3 very peaceful, successful, and smooth democratic parliamentary elections since 2008, and now we are on the eve of the 3rd local government elections on the 22nd of this month, I think it is pretty safe to say that political discourse in Bhutan remains very largely very superficial, and politics merely a role play, I would say, highly personalized and very, very male dominated, as you could also pick up from the data that Namgye shared. So this is against the background of in the land of gross national happiness, as Bhutan is famous for, where our development philosophy is guided by Buddhist principles of gross national happiness, which was conceptualized by our 4th king, where more than 50% of the population is female, where matrilineal customs dominate our local culture, and the way of life within which women inherit property, pass on their daughter, the properties to daughters, so mothers to daughters, as Namgye was also mentioning, where also our men actually, especially I know coming from Western Bhutan, men take a lot of pride in this fact that they take nothing from the house, but they try to give back to the sisters and members of the family that leave behind in their maternal home, where it is normal for grooms to move into the homes of their brides, where women are very much in charge of the home and affairs around the house, where the girl child is a favored child and a wanted child, unlike in our neighboring countries, where gender relations are highly egalitarian. And so this is such a progressive, almost enviable, I'm sure, by as seen by many, and also almost mythical image, compared to the status of women and girls in our immediate neighborhood in South Asia, at least. But yet against this background, it will surprise you to know that it is still a very big deal to see or find women in leadership positions. So at another level, despite that very favorable, very mythically, very romantic situation of women and girls in Bhutan, one can safely say that Bhutan is also no different from the rest of the world, especially if we view, through the magnifying glass and through the gender lens much more closely. To give a better sense of this with some data, as I said earlier, we had the first, parliamentary elections in 2008. And at that time, we, achieved 10 women in a seat. And our parliament has 72 seats, 25 seats in the upper house and 47 seats in the lower house, which is the House of People's Representatives. And in 2008, after the first parliamentary elections, we had 10 women sitting there in the parliament. Which meant we had something like 14%, 13.88% women in parliament. Out of that 10, 8 were elected and 2 appointed by the king, the eminent members that Namgye referred to. In the upper house of the parliament, which is called the National Council, the 20 districts elect a member each, and then there are 5 seats appointed by the king. And out of the 5 seats, His Majesty has always ensured right from the very beginning to appoint 2 women out of the 5 seats. So, that has been a savior for us, because at the second parliamentary elections in 2013, there was a huge backslide. We went down from 10 women in the parliament to 6 women. So the percentage of women representation actually fell from almost 14% to 8%. Which meant only 4 were elected and 2 again eminent members. Now today, after the third parliamentary elections of 2018, we have achieved the highest ever Bhutan has seen in our history, both pre-introduction of democracy as well as post. We have 11 women currently in the parliament, so it's 15.3% highest ever. Out of which, again, out of the 8, 3 are in the upper house in the National Council and 8 are in the National Assembly. And that's the parliament. But then across the country in the 205 local governments, again, every 5 years we go in for democratic elections. And in 2011, after the first local government elections, there's a pool of something like around 1,500, roughly. I rounded off to 1,500, but actually it's about 1,454 seats in the local governments around the country. Imagine, out of 1,454, only 98 were women. And so that gave us 6.9% as a women representation. But actually at the highest level in the local government, the most prized position, who is the real decision maker in each local government, we call it the GUP, which is like a chairperson of the local government. There was only 1 woman elected in 2011. So, in terms of percentage at the highest level in local government, we only achieved 0.5%. Now, in 2016, when we had the second local elections, we managed to double that, of course, with a lot of effort that especially my organization put in of mobilizing and preparing women for the elections. We managed to double it, so which means we only managed to get 2 women elected in that election at the highest level. But otherwise, overall, from 6.9%, we now came to 11.6%, which means we managed to get 178 women elected in the local governments. So, overall, as it is always said, 50% of the population in any country at any given time, is women. And so it is in Bhutan too. Sometimes, in fact, 51% too. So 50% of the population is basically being represented at the highest, level or in decision-making positions, especially in elected offices. Let's say the parliament, by 15%. and in the local governments by only less than 1% in the cabinet, we have out of 10 seats, we have, only one woman, minister, who's the health minister, whom Namge just mentioned. And in the highest level of the civil service in the government, after a very long period, we finally have achieved 20%, in the sense we have, His Majesty the King appointed 2 female secretaries of the government. So finally we have 20% there, and that position for a very long time we haven't had women there. And in the constitutional posts also, at the highest level, like in the, we have 4 constitutional bodies, like the Anti-Corruption, the Election Commission, the Royal Audit Authority, and the Royal Civil Service Commission. And in those positions, in the chair position, currently we are like 50% women, because 2 of them, the Anti-Corruption and the Royal Civil Service Commission, are headed by women. And the remaining amongst the the deputy level, the commissioners, we have something like 12% women, because there's only 1 out of 7 who's a woman. So on an average, actually, when I put all, the organizations at the highest level together and take an average of women, at the highest level, it basically translates roughly into an average of something like 17-18% women in the leadership level in Bhutan, across the board, if you take elected and the civil service, etc. So, then, when you look at, when you see this kind of data, then, it makes you doubt, because I remember some years ago, in an article for Druk Journal, saying that I had myself co-authored, and I said, actually, it's the myth of equality, On one hand, as I mentioned, presented in the beginning, it's such a mythical, almost unimaginable situation where everything sounds so favorable and is so good, and that is also not cooked up. It's really real, of a very egalitarian, very favorable, strong position of women in Bhutanese society, and it's all there. Those pieces are there, but yet, it is not really, that myth of, gender equality or equality in society is not so much in sync with these realities today as we speak from a data point of view. When you look at the statistics, then they don't really add up. So, as I put it in that particular article, I remember saying it's really, for Bhutan, we are really a typical case of, matrilineal in a patrilineal mold, I said, basically we are such a, wonderful, seemingly very, beautiful matrilineal society, yet we seem to be stuck in a patrilineal mold, and is that a desirable trend? Definitely no. What comes to my mind is, is this really the outcome? Because we're talking about the role of women in the modern Bhutanese society. And then modern, what is modern? Modern is really a product of, all the development that has gone on so far, the progress that the country's achieved, a result of modern education and, exposure of, the educated, having traveled the world and seen, the, development around the globe, actually. And so, my question is this then what we see, this contrast of the myth of equality not being in sync with the actual reality? Is this really the outcome or the impact of the so-called development per se, the progress, the education exposure, the modernization of our society? What is our really society evolving into? Basically, it's a myth of gender equality versus a reality of patriarchy. And patriarchy, I think, patriarchal norms, values, influence and dominate in all spheres, actually. If we really examine very gender egalitarian, seemingly gender egalitarian society, if we really examine very deeply, patriarchal norms and values, at a very subconscious level also seem to dominate in all our spheres. Actually, we have to be so careful, starting from home, in the workplaces, in school, whether it is in media, in so many of our, so-called age-old traditions and customs and practices and rituals that we really uphold, consider men to be superior to women, very very overtly. Actually, in some cases we have where women are in a way discriminated or subordinated, actually. And this we have really seen affecting and impacting, and really becoming a hindrance to women, getting elected in the elections, whether it is in parliamentary elections, whether it is in the local, and particularly in the local government elections, because for us, we have been very intimately actually engaged. My organization has been intimately engaged in the local government elections, and we've seen, there in some of the districts we have these local festivals where local leaders have to be, dressed in monk robes and ride horses and attend, let's say, the Punaka Domchin, the festival of Punaka. And to that there are certain yokes, local governments of Thimphu and Punaka who have to participate, and it's always a problem because there are very strong women candidates whom we've prepared to participate in the elections, but the local mindset of the people and the communities is that if we elect women into those positions, then it's going to bring bad luck. We might have famine, we might have diseases, whatever, all kinds of bad things will fall on our society and community, and it's not auspicious, etc. And then how can it's always been men, so how can women ride a horse and dress as a monk and participate in the Punadomchin, things like that, And then there are other rituals of making offerings to local protector deities at the beginning of every important occasion, where the local leader, whoever is the highest in highest in position in that area or that organization, must lead such a ritual. It's called the marchang, offering the marchang. And those have always been traditionally done by men, obviously, because men have always been there in the public sphere and women were not there before. So men have done it, but now it's in the people's brains, and it's deep in their mindset that only men should do it, and if women do it, it's not auspicious. So these are things that at a very subconscious level, these biases become a hindrance to women getting elected, although they are, in fact, we have seen in many places, in many local governments, there were stronger and better, more capable, more qualified women candidates who would have been better leaders, yet they could not get elected just because of these kind of, cultural gender stereotyped mindsets, that really held people back from giving their votes to women, So these unconscious, biases really come in the way of women. And, again, talking about patriarchy, and I remember you said the film was made by this, the film Red Phallus, and I'm sure many of you have seen that. We are also, on one hand, a very matrilineal, very, respecting women, regarding women, very matrilineal society. Yet, we really celebrate the phallus, And for me personally, I feel, people always say, then, people who have been to Bhutan, I'm sure, as Dr. Ermila knows, phalluses are painted all over the main entrance of the houses, hung on every corner of the roof, etc., to keep the evil spirits away, to protect the family, etc. So it's, again, I feel it's really a symbol of a very macho society, where women and modesty and male phallus is celebrated and really something to be proud of. So that's, for me, it is a symbol of a macho society, because we really celebrate the phallus. It goes all over the place in the public sphere. So, it is really, for me, the other thing is that I feel these things, these aspects make, the role of women, and for women to find their, their befitting roles in modern Bhutanese society, quite a challenge, and quite complex also, because while women have changed and women are changing, and we are adapting to the modern times and the opportunities that it offers, and it and the demands that are there, because we want to be out there, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be at the table at the decision making in the decision making levels, etc. And then, of course, we are grappling and struggling with our, the gender stereotypical roles, and which we don't complain about, of course, our triple roles. So women, want to be in leadership positions, and women, even though you make it to the leadership positions, it doesn't mean that you give up on the home front, So those are there, but yet I think, we are so many. I think so many women who are in leadership today, I think the role models that we have, I think are actually paving the way and showing that women can do it, because it's just that, as long as we don't get the opportunities, there's no way for us to showcase our leadership. But I think our women who, through the blessings of His Majesty, the King's, initiatives, and I think through various royal decrees, etc., I think we had many strong role models, women role models that Dr. Edwila also mentioned, and then lately also we have many more who are in current positions. They may be a handful, but they are strong role models.
I'll just we'll come back to this, and then I think talk about examples and go into the specifics soon. I'd like to bring in Amstring Dolkar at this point, and then maybe talk about social progress now. So Amstring Dolkar, as I introduced earlier, is the executive director of Renew, has done a lot of social work, especially in an area that was stigmatized until very recently, and even to this day continues a bit of stigma. So they've been pioneers in the field of helping women survivors, enabling them in society, giving them a very, I would say, emancipating them in a way as well. And Her Majesty the Gelium has been such a pioneer leading this fearlessly. Amfinsok also touched upon how she talked about the myth of equality and the reality of patriarchy, and even in this area it seems to be so. So now I'd like to invite Amstring Dolkar to talk about how the roles of women have evolved over time, especially in the context of social progress. You have to unmute Amstring Dolkar.
Okay, thank you, and hello everyone. As I've been introduced, I don't want to repeat that. So I would like to, in the interest of time, I would like to straight away go into the topic. And we're talking about role of women in Bhutan, and I think it's very evident in the what involvement, initiatives, and works that has been done by our women in the royal family. And when I talk about the women in our royal family, I'm talking about their majesties, the Queen Mothers, and Her Majesty, the Queen, the present Queen, who have shown so much of strength and led by examples, especially in the areas of the social sector. And in the areas of work that I do, I have been working in the empowerment of women, especially women who are vulnerable, and also are survivors of domestic violence, gender-based violence, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment, and also in the areas of suicide, mental health, and trauma. These are some of the areas that, are silently born by our women. And these are the areas that cannot be seen. So in this area, Her Majesty, the patron of Renew, Her Majesty Gyelim Sangye Children Wongchuk, has been a pioneer and has been so brave enough to break the silence of violence in our country, and has been also the actor who has taken up the domestic prevention of domestic violence 2013 Act, which is now very predominantly being used by all service providers. And I take this opportunity to thank Her Majesty for bringing women in the forefront, and also addressing gender equality, gender equity, and so many areas that has been these are areas that are very new to Bhutan, and even in times immemorial, you can also see that the women, strong women of Bhutan, were always women who were, in the role of the leaders in the communities, and also the queens that were in the past. So with that, I would like to also talk about an anecdote that when it was sometime in 1990, I was in college. I was in the third year of my college, and I remember that day when His Majesty, the fourth King of Bhutan, came to visit the college where I was studying, and we were all preparing for the 7th five-year plan then, and we were all asked to come up with a presentation, and I was given the topic. This takes me back to the topic, women's role in development. Never did I imagine myself talking about it after how many decades, after college. And there I was talking about women's representation in the parliament, in the National Assembly. And I was, very innocently putting up and talking about, the requirement for quota system, 25% of women's, presence in the National Assembly. And His Majesty was very candid, and he did, there was a lot of discussion. And His Majesty talked about why, we need that, and why women cannot come, stand and, become equal, like come up and face the reality, to fight against your positions. So never did I realize that we would have women representation in our assembly now. So why I'm talking about this is I feel at that time, although I was very innocent, I did make a small dent or a small impression on Our Majesty. And His Majesty was very kind, and he joked and he said, "Oh, you boys in the college, you must be harassing the women in the college. So therefore, in order to support them, I am going to present you all a generator, electricity generator." And that's how, the college that I studied in Sharapse College, we were given a generator, which is still, in the college now. So why I'm talking about this is, I did play my part, although it was a very different topic. I did play my part, and made a difference in getting. We had lights. When the lights went off, we didn't have to stay in the dark. We had generator, and which gave us light. So I'm just putting it up as a joke, or to just lighten up the moods. But then I promised myself that I am going to make a difference in the development. No matter how small a role I play, I must make some changes in the society. You know, that's how I began my career in Renew. And in Renew, we have, you know, programs such as prevention, intervention, and reintegration. So the services that we provide in this area has benefited women and has empowered them. And maybe one day we hope that these women would, you know, provide their services. The women who have been empowered now would lead by example and provide these services to women who are, you know, also in the same situation and in the same position that they have been some time ago. So we have provided our services about 174,000 services in Renew to empower our women. And one of the core services that we have is the counseling services, the shelter services, the legal aid, you know, and then the microfinance, which is from the German bank. I think it's called the Sparkassen Bank in Germany, which is serving, you know, our women. And one of the most benefiting services that we have provided is the livelihood skills development. Together with the microfinance and the livelihood skills services, we have been able to really, you know, create income generating services. And, you know, from that, our women have really been empowered. And, you know, we hope that through this, you know, domestic violence and gender violence, we can really prevent it in the future. For now, I would like to just say this much. Maybe in the future, in the later discussions, questions may come up. And may I now hand over to Namgi.
Thank you, Eltrin Dolkar, for sharing that. From the two speakers, you've heard that not everything is gross national happiness in Bhutan. Although we are guided by the development philosophy, when you really take apart the pieces, then you see that, like, you know, how you have, I always like to compare it to a mosaic, and even glass painting, right? There are different pieces. When you look at them carefully, some of them are not perfect. But when you move back and then you look at the whole picture, it does appear to be beautiful. We aren't a perfect society. And I think the panel here tonight is very candid about this, but we're also discussing things that work in Bhutan, like things that are being done correctly. Examples like Amthunzok and Amsring Dolkar, moving away from governance and the social sphere. We're going to move to Amsona Mongmo, who is actually a real trailblazer. So she entered the field of entrepreneurship when the word entrepreneur itself wasn't being flung about, wasn't mainstream. Only in retrospect are we applying the term to Amsona Mongmo. She entered the field of travel when travel was an entirely new concept to many Bhutanese. So if you could share with us what your journey's been like, how you got into travel, and basically starting in a sector that was not, women weren't leading as you were in the time, and if you could share how the evolution has happened from your time and what you see today, Lamsunam.
Good evening to everyone. I hope you can hear me, and especially good evening to Ermel. I'm so happy to see you after many years. Really nice. I was so delighted to know that you are on the panel. So my greetings to you from Bhutan, Ermel, first, okay? And now, as Namgi would want to hear about my getting into business, it's been a very interesting journey for me. I mean, it was those days in the 1980s, just a homemaker raising my children. And I think by then I already had about 3 children. And, you know, it just came along and I just fell into it. And it's all without the plan, but I was just pushed into it and I just took it on. And like in those days in the government, I mean, like if your husband is working with the government and you were not allowed to get in, do or get yourself into business and things like that. But somehow that I pursued that. And then I also happened to be very lucky to be in a in the position that I'm in now. And so it's been a very interesting journey. And then I started my travel business in 1985. And comparing to now and that time when we were working, it's like when I look back, it's I feel it's such a big change with the new technology now and those days. And I started my business, especially with the ticketing, catering to making arrangements to all the government officials traveling outside. And being the only, I mean, I would say that I think I was one of the first women who got into it. And like I said, I've been lucky. And then those days, if you had to, when you have to make a travel itinerary, now you have to go to the offices with 2 thick books, which is called ABC book. And that was the, you have to make all the travel itinerary and reading that book. And then not like these days, just click on a button and then where you get all the information. And it's been a very fun and exciting journey. And you could really feel. And then I have so many friends those days, when I was doing this, and they say, oh, you're the one who actually made my first travel arrangement, who did the ticketing to the first trip to abroad. So you had that kind of a connection, personal connection. And then of course, and how we had to do those days, but we had to get all our ticketing from Calcutta, and there was no True Care flights. We had to get them through the post, through Bakdogra and things like this. And all the itineraries, everything we had to get through the phone. And of course, we didn't have, communication system was not as efficient as now. Those days you had to call, and then trunk call it was. So you had to make a trunk booking, which took us almost about 2 to 3 hours to connect ourselves to India to get all the information. So of course, then you give all the information, they would do all the ticketing and send it up. And sometimes, there are lapses where people, where things goes wrong and you can't make any changes. And sometimes people would miss the flight and they were not so happy with your service, but they had no choice because they had to travel with me. But I was the only one who was doing the, doing the travel arrangements. So we joke and then connect ourselves with the clients and then bonded very well. So it was been a very fun time at, how I started my business. So, and then after that, we moved into tourism, and that was in 1990, early 90s, when we moved to tourism, and it was in trekking. So started trekking, and I was working with suddenly I realized that I was working with all men. So I had all my trekking staff, and I was only the person who was actually, when I look back and I said, especially going trekking and traveling, I did all the snowman trek, and I did all the travel, covered all the trekking routes those days. And then suddenly I realized that I'm with all the men, about 10, 15 men, and then there I was leading. And so when I look back, I feel that I've achieved quite a bit, and I feel very satisfied with what I've done.
I think the interesting thing about you, you never, it was never a conscious decision to be a part, I think to be a pioneer or a trailblazer. You were just doing things, like you were saying, in a way, almost going with the flow. But then now when you look back, I think you do realize that it was very radical at that point in time.
Yeah, it was when I'm with no plan. I was just thrown into it, and then I just took it on, and everything moved very smoothly, and it's been a lot of excitement and fun working with what I've been doing. And then of course working for yourself, and it gave you so much of a freedom, and you could do what you want. And then certain, if you make up your mind, then you do what you need to do. If you have a clear for heart and things like that, and if you put your mind into it, it's nothing stops you from doing it. So I had no problem doing what I wanted to do. So
I think Sonam's experience is so important to share with everybody who's joined in the panel, and even whether you're Bhutanese or not, because I think a lot of Bhutanese young women and even young men think that it's only in this day and age that women are so independent and so powerful and so rebellious. But then I think the original rebel is women like you, Sonam, and I'm so glad that we have you on the panel today, La. I want to move to Amphinsuk for a while, and you bring in your views on how, when you speak about gender, you're talking about the myth of equality versus reality of patriarchy, and how you feel that when we actually look through the gender lens, that there are so many deficits when it comes to gender and Bhutan. So if you could, maybe your comments on how our government has worked with gender, have there been improvements, or what is there a critique or appreciation of what has happened so far, particularly how we move ahead with the 5-year plan. So then we have our development measured and guided by something called the 5-year plans, and this was brought in from India again. So I just wanted to hear Amphinsuk's views on this, especially since you've worked in this area for so long now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Namge. Basically, I think government, especially as you've also mentioned earlier, under the umbrella of the National Commission for Women and Children, I think have always been making efforts to try and mainstream gender, because Bhutan is signatory to many international conventions, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW in particular, I think, and then various other conventions. So therefore, and then of course the most recent being the SDG goals, that have to be met as well. So I think right from the 10th 5-year plan onwards, government actually has been making concerted efforts. The National Plan of Action for Gender, from 2008 to 2013 in the 10th 5-year plan, was one initiative that was led by the National Commission for Women and Children to try and mainstream gender across all the agencies and sectors. Then in the 11th 5-year plan, I think, it was further mainstreamed, and I think into the 5-year plan proper, by actually having within the 5-year plan itself a national key result area, which is, which was titled Gender-Friendly Environment for Women Participation. And, in fact, that was actually around the time that, of course, BNU, the organization that, which I am driving and which I'm leading right now, was conceptualized around 2012 and mandated by all the elected women who were elected in 2008 and 2011. And we, came together to be a networking platform to really facilitate, and build capacity and confidence of women, and of course to mobilize also and prepare women for future elections, etc. So around that time, after we were kind of conceptualized and we were, beginning to operate, was the 11th 5-year plans, NKRA on the gender-friendly environment, which had a particular, key performance indicator, which was to draft a legislation to ensure quotas for women in, elected offices, including parliament and local government. And this was like really in black and white in the 11th 5-year plan, which really got us excited as NCWC and BNU. And that was when in 2013, right after the second parliamentary elections, BNU together with the National Commission, we organized the first, national conference on women in politics, where we brought together some, over 200 people, and we had, the government. We actually were trying to rope in the Prime Minister to deliver the keynote address, because we were so excited by the government's commitment as well to draft a legislation, But yeah, lo and behold, in 2016, the government withdrew because, within the government's 5-year plan, this key performance indicator was there. And the political party that actually won the elections and the second parliamentary election, which was the PDP, had actually also made a pledge to draft legislation. So it was really in sync. The party pledge was in sync with the 5-year plan, and that really got us excited. But it was not to be. In 2016, the party dropped its pledge, and we were a bit disappointed. However, I think in the 12th 5-year plan, that was from 2018 to 2023, once again, the government, continues basically led by the Gross National Happiness Commission, and together with the National Commission, did not give up. And once again, they have formulated a national key result area called Gender Equality and Women Empowerment. So at the moment, that is what the National Commission for Women and Children is driving. We have MOU with the National Commission for Women and Children, and we try to work particularly on a plan of action that the NCWC has drawn up, called the National Plan of Action for Gender Equality in Elected Offices. So that is primarily for raising awareness and building capacity, and we are trying to advocate very strongly for temporary special measures to be adopted by either tweaking policies or having some kind of legislation, but we've not gotten very far with it. And we, as Namgye, you're also aware, BNU has led, and together with the National Commission for Women and Children, we also launched the Bhutan Women Parliamentary Caucus, which we are hosting. And that is also, an instrument or a platform within BNU, and in partnership with NCWC and with the Parliament. We try to orient parliamentarians and trying to, really sensitize parliamentarians and try to work on a partnership with the Parliament to try and work towards some sort of legal, legislative, transformations or changes, introductions to have temporary special measures in place. Because at the moment, I realize increasingly, given the current situation, I feel that unless we have some sort of a policy tweak or a legislative tool, it is going to be very difficult for Bhutan to meet particularly its obligation towards achieving gender equality, within the framework of the SDG, because SDG goal number 5 is to achieve Planet 50-50 by 2030. And we are nowhere, to reaching that goal. Forget Planet 50-50. I think it's going to be difficult even to achieve, 2080. So we hope that, with the efforts that the government's making and with the little things that we are able to do as the civil society organization, and of course we are constantly working together with media organizations like JAB and, and others, we hope that somewhere along the line, there's more, people who agree with us, and we can try to get some sort of a temporary special measure in place for Bhutan. Otherwise, without that, I think no matter what we do, it's going to be very difficult, because sometimes I think top-down measures are required, because bottom-up, just simply through awareness raising and mobilizing and preparing, it's not enough to, raise the numbers of women in leadership. And I think some special measures are required. And just like back in 1998, when His Majesty the Fourth King issued a royal decree to the National Assembly to do something about, raising women representation, that year in the National Assembly, I think the women representation then in pre-democracy days went up from, let's say, 0 to 14%. So I think, some sort of a top-down measures are required if you want to translate the goodwill in the Constitution of Bhutan, as well as all our international, all our international commitments. I think there's no other way. I think we have to find a fast track measure.
Less Amphensok, thank you. We've really picked out, I think has really pointed out the glaring gaps when it comes to gender in Bhutanese society. And I know you feel very passionate about this because you've worked so long and so hard in this sphere, and I've worked along with you as well, and you've opened my eyes to a lot of things in Bhutan that are not really visible at first sight. We have some questions coming in, so I want maybe Amtring Dolkar to take this. So the question is actually from someone called Tring Chodin via Facebook. And the question is, do you think with modernization, Bhutanese society has actually progressed in our thinking about gender equality, or have we somehow regressed and still struggle with accepting strong women beyond women leaders who look, act, and behave like men? So what do you think? Do you want me to repeat the question, or is this clear, La?
Yeah, I think the second part. Do you mind repeat the second part?
Bhutanese society has actually progressed in our thinking. Do you think we progressed in our thinking on gender equality, or have we somehow regressed and still struggle with accepting strong women? Instead, we seem to be accepting women who look, act, and behave like men, apparently. Do we have to be like that to be accepted, is the question, Imam.
Well, for this question, I look at myself, and I consider myself a very strong woman who can make a lot of difference in wherever I'm working. But I don't think I look and act like a man. So taking that, I think I don't think we need to look like a man and act like a man to be accepted as you know, in the areas of gender equality. It's how you really educate, how you accept, and how you really behave, in the sense like in your understanding of being sensitive to different genders, is what I feel, you know, we need to really work on, and not really, you know, fight for our rights, you know, because I think in Bhutan, our policies, our, you know, we all know that our monarchs have given us a lot of, you know, a platform. The equity, you know, is there. How you utilize it, it's in our hand. And we like in other countries, we don't have to really be a feminist. We don't have to really fight for our rights. You know, it's how you take up your role in really not being discriminated and not being, you know, bullied or harassed. You know? So what I actually am trying to say is, you know, the second part of the question, where we don't need to really behave like a man to be accepted by another man. You can still be a woman and still, you know, be accepted if we, as you know, as a society, know how to really provide support to each other. So this is what I think. I don't think we have regressed. I think gender equality, you know, is moving forward with so many very strong leaders in the country. And, you know, the representation here is here itself, that, you know, we will only progress. It's just that it needs time, and we should not be, we should not really lose hope. I think the policies are there, the you know, platform is there. It's just that the implementation part is in the hands of all, you know, all the women out there to really support each other. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think it's just, I think it really is on the individual as well, like Tring was saying. And it isn't just the onus isn't just on institutions, but then it's really about being so being me, Namgizam, being Stringdolkar, and none of us are men, look like men or behave like men, like you were saying. But I think in the Bhutanese context, we do have some sayings when, you know, the idea of strength, power is associated with the man, like Amphensok was referring to the phallus and machismo in Bhutan. So I think it stems from that. Sonam, I wonder if you could take this question. It comes from Mr. Reinhard Wolf, the president of German Bhutan Himalaya Society, and he asks, when do you think we'll have a female prime minister in Bhutan now? You have to unmute yourself, la.
Good evening, Reinhard. Good to know that you're also on this program, yeah? And I trust that you come up with this question. Well, I think it's very difficult to predict when we will have a lady prime minister. Well, although we have a lot of capable female who can take on the job, but I think it's, from my point of view, I feel it's up to the, you know, herself, whether she wants, with the decision whether she wants to pursue it with whether you know, I'm like, to take such a huge task on yourself, whether you want to really go or you want to, you choose to be what you want to do, right? So, but when we have a lot of good candidates, but this decision is hers. But sometimes when you think that even if you want to do it, but then you are, you have so much responsibilities, like you have to play the role of a mother, you have to play the role of a wife, and then you have to play a lot of roles. And the women have much more role to play than the men. I'm sorry, Mr. Reinhardt, but that's the truth. And if you want to be a strong-minded career person, we have a lot of capable women who can definitely be a prime minister, and I'm sure they will make a good prime minister.
I mean, I'm sure there are women who want to get up and stand for prime minister if there is an environment conducive to her being a whole woman. If she wants to be a parent, she can be a parent. If she wants to be the prime minister, she can. If she wants to be more, if she's allowed to juggle all this with the kind of support that I think men receive, I think any woman is capable. Amphensok and I've had in-depth discussions on this. Thanks, Sonomo, for sharing that. You were mentioning how women juggle time, if they have the time and resources they can. I also want to touch upon this topic of volunteerism, which is suddenly picking up now, I think, among millennials and the younger generation. But Sonam, you happen to be the OG, as we say in urban lingo, original volunteer. Tell us how this volunteerism happened and what made it possible for you to volunteer, and what caused you to volunteer.
Okay, on the volunteerism, now, you know, we you know, when we you hear with so many criticism saying this is not functioning, or the government should do this, you know, we had so many criticism, we're only criticizing, but we're not doing anything. So me and my other three friends, like I'm Ugandema and I'm Dinky and things like that, so we had this kind of a discussion. In fact, when I was going to England, Irmala, when I was going to see Dragana, to see her and to attend to her, and that's when I got to spend more time in Delhi waiting for my visa. So Ugandem, I was staying with Ugandem. So then we were just talking as a woman, and then she was saying, oh my goodness, this doesn't function, you know. So all what you hear is the system is not functioning. So then we came up with an idea. He said, instead of criticizing, I said, let's try to do something and see if we can make a change. So we thought to make a change and to volunteer ourselves will be good to pick on with the hospital, because hospital is where a lot of people come, and thus we thought, you know, we could do something to make a little change. So then Amagundema, she said, okay, then let's do it. So I said, okay. Dinky is a professional trained nurse, and I'm Damcho, and I'm Ugandema. So they were all health background who was trained. I think they went to England and in New Zealand to be trained as in the nursing. So they came back and they were working, but they were no longer in the service. So, and I'm the one who didn't, have any of this background. But then we built this idea together, and then Ugindama, and we wrote a proposal to the hospital and gave a proposal to the hospital offering a free service. But the hospital, they took 1 year to accept our offer. So anyway, they agreed, we signed an MOU, and then we thought what we could do. So the first thing what we came up was with queuing up to create an awareness, queuing up. Because if you go to the hospital, you will see everybody rushing, things. So we thought maybe let's see if we can also create a little awareness, and also educate our people, saying that government is providing a free service. So we should also respect and not demanding, so things. So we want to give both help assisting the hospital and also creating a little awareness that we as a citizen should be also responsible, and we should also be grateful to the government for the free services that we enjoy now. So that's how we started. And then we signed an agreement for about 2 years. And then we, initial idea was we would maybe do on 2 days in a month on a rotation basis, and if you could have more volunteers. But we got about 100 plus people who signed up and gave an introduction and things like this, and then presentation to the hospital and with all the volunteers. But then eventually it did not work that way. So dealing with people is not easy, and we had a lot of young girls who was volunteering. And then it is, in the hospital how people are, they're demanding services, and then they get quite aggressive at times. So later on, it came down to just a few of us, and then we realized if you want to volunteer, you just don't do it just for the sake of doing it. You have to have the heart to do it, and then enjoy what you're doing to make a difference. So then we had full dedicated members who was willing to do this. And then for me, especially, I thought, okay, we signed up and we offered our services. So we have to make it a difference and let the hospital feel that we are not just, fooling around. So took this shoulder on myself, and then but from 2 years, we went up to 3.5 years, not realizing that it part-time was supposed to be a couple of hours in a day, but it came to a full-time, working from morning 9 to 5, and I would go on till about 10, 11. But you would have a lot of people who needed your service from all walks of life. And then then I started enjoying, and like our other friends as well. And then we continued to work for 3.5 years. And then, but that's how you see at least queuing is a little bit in place, and then people respect standing in your line and not just overcrowding yourself. So basically, I enjoy doing such work. So
Thank you, Amphana, for sharing your experience. I think yours is such a fine example to illustrate how women, if you really take women on board, we are hardly ever a part of the problem, but always a part of the solution. And I think that's so great. I think your example's so good. And thank you for sharing your story, La. Amphansok, I want you to answer this question, even though I was the one who made the reference, because I know for a fact that you have worked with them and have a lot to share. But if you could keep it brief, because we're almost touching 11:30 now. So the question is, you all at some point referred to the Indian experience. India indeed has a quota for women, even and especially at a local and village level. Are you in touch with civil society representatives from India in order to draw conclusions from the Indian experience? And this comes from Frank Hoffman Lamphensuk. If you could answer this question now.
Yes, actually, in India, we worked very closely with the Hunger Project that basically has been working with the Panchayat women, especially in the Panchayats, because in India, they have this, although by the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution of India, there is a mandatory 33% reserved seats for in all the Panchayats. but the states have now actually gone further to increase it to 50% in fact, almost all the states of India. They've actually gone up now to 50% women in the panchayats, because they say, I mean, when women make up 50% of society, why should it be 33%? It should be 50%. So, that was very inspiring for us. And in fact, we've had the opportunity, when we had the funds available, to also take our women on, some of our elected women from local governments to, have some exposure and sharing experiences with panchayats in India, in the south of India, in Kerala, also in Gujarat and in Delhi. We have actually done some exchange with them. And we've had resource people from the Hunger Project coming over to Bhutan also, and we've done quite some good work together. So yes, we are in touch with this particular organization in India, which they work across 7 or 8 states. Yes, and how these women in the panchayats work after they are elected through the quota system is very interesting and very inspiring. And, it was really helpful for our women to see them. And they, in fact, some of our women came back with, highly inspired and got some good ideas. And that really helped them to, do new things in their own local governments here as well. And it really moved them to see, because in Bhutan, compared to the women serving in panchayats in India, our women are in a fairly comfortable position where they are almost like civil servants. They get salaries and, they get travel allowances and all that. Whereas in India, in the panchayats, you're really on your own. You barely get $200 to just attend a assembly. That's all. You don't get salaries, etc. So from that point of view also, our women felt that they need to do more. So those women who were able to benefit from, meeting women in panchayats in India, really felt, that they needed to do much more. They needed to work harder in Bhutan. So it is really, I always say that for our women in local governments, they don't have to go further than India to really learn and exchange and pick up ideas from there.
Lasam, thank you. We're going to begin wrapping up, but I have a very specific question for Amsung Dolka. It's an area that we haven't touched, and it's such an important area, especially this year. Her Majesty the Queen actually really spearheaded and actually was a catalyst for the mental health movement, I would say. She's instituted a separate section in the hospital for mental health care and well-being. Amsung Dolka instituted the Bhutan Board for Certified Counselors. She's the first certified counselor in Bhutan. The question I have for you is, whenever people talk about Bhutan, gross national happiness is bound to come up, always comes up. But I want to ask you, how happy are Bhutanese women in Bhutan now?
Very interesting question. It's a $1 million question. And to that, I really don't know how happy they are. But if you ask me how happy you are, I'm a very happy person, and I hope everybody is happy, but which is not. The happiness of a person does not only depend on what you have or who you are or where you are. Happiness depends upon your mental state of mind. And I think if you really look at the state of mind, I think a lot of our people in Bhutan, unfortunately, as per my experience and the women that I've seen, have a lot of issues. I feel like if the Pema Center, initiated by Her Majesty, the Queen of Bhutan, came at the right time. It was sought for a very long time. I remember, about 20 years ago, we were talking about it, discussing about this issue, and many people didn't understand what mental health issues was. So finally, now the time has come. The time to provide services have come, and it came at a very opportune time when when the issues did not go out of hand. I think we still have time to address it, and you see a lot of cases of depression, panic, anxiety, trauma, all, domestic violence. These are all triggered by, alcohol. These, also, especially women, when we touch menopause, there are a lot of things, complications that go around menopause. Women, they lose their interest in not only in relationship, but also in many intimate things, within the family. And also they become lonely. The hormonal, that changes that take place has a handover, it has power over us. And if you don't understand what is happening to you at the right time, it causes a lot of problems for you and your family. And also, like, there's a lot of child abuse, there's a lot of rape, suicide, so many things, that should have been identified at a younger age, when children are growing up, where we don't have the expertise, and it has been carried up to, at their adulthood, and it has not been addressed, and it becomes a full-blown then disorder. And when you go to the hospital, there are we have very less psychiatrists, and there are so many issues. And I think I cannot talk about everyone, but the women that I've seen have undergone, basically needs a lot of help, and not everybody is happy. And there's a section of society who are vulnerable and will be going through a lot of mental health issues. So
that's where you can come in, but that's where you come in. Women like you come in to help, to guide women, and then to provide them the support that is required. Like you're saying, there are gaps, but the gaps are being filled. And you telling the story is showing us that we are moving ahead by accepting the fact that not everybody is happy in Bhutan. Women may not be happy in Bhutan as well, but there's something that can be done about it. So thank you so much, Amsring, for sharing this. If I could hear very short closing remarks from Sonam and Funsok, basically about the challenges and opportunities you see for women in a modern Bhutanese society. Sonam, do you want to go first?
Okay.
You've muted yourself. If you could unmute.
Now is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now you can hear me. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, what was the question again? Yeah.
What
opportunities
or challenges do you see for Bhutanese women in modern Bhutanese society?
Oh, I think the opportunity now in the modern world for the Bhutanese society, for all the upcoming young girls, I think there's no end to it, especially with the technology. You can see a lot of young girls coming up and with different ideas, and because you can get all the information from the Google, and from there's so much information that you can get. So people these days, you don't even need to go anywhere. You can just sit in your one room, and then just, if you're very internet savvy, and you can do anything. So I can see a lot of young girls, and there's no end to it. I can see they can really go very far. And then, of course, because they're open to, they have a lot of exposure now comparing to those days. So they have a lot of opportunity, I can see, ahead of them. There are a lot of capable young girls. I see they're very enterprising too.
Thank you so much, Sonam. Thank you, Funsok.
Yeah. I think for me, I want to actually, to answer this question, I also want to build on the question that was asked earlier by somebody saying, to be a strong leader, do you have to act like a man? and be accepted in Bhutan.
Oh yeah, actually, she actually sent one back. So if you could just listen to this before you answer. She said her question was a little misunderstood. What she was trying to say was get our view on Bhutanese society's acceptance of strong women, women who raise their voice and do not fit into the traditional mold of how or what a woman should be. So what are your views on that? Is Bhutanese society accepting of strong women, Imela? So if you could just put that into
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I think Bhutanese society on the whole, I would say, is very flexible and very accepting, very, I think so long as we dare to be strong, and just like, you in the conversation you had with Amsalam earlier, I think as long as we dare to be there and as long as we dare to be who we are, I think society is willing to accept us as we are. But I think that confidence has to be in us to be able to project ourselves as we want to be. So I think my answer would be yes. I think our society is quite accepting. So it's just that we shouldn't hesitate, because the larger, the bigger picture, the environment is not very conducive, because the bigger, the thoughts are that leadership is for men, politics is for men. So therefore, in order to be accepted, you must be the typical, you must fit into the typical mold of being a meek and being a very modest and humble woman. So I think that's not completely true for Bhutan. I would say in Bhutan, I think everything is chalega, as we say. I think as long as we dare to be, I think people are willing to accept us. I think we have to be brave to just be ourselves. And then from that point of view, I feel that because of that, I think because of the kind of society we are, uh, given the complexities that I had presented earlier, I also feel, I see a huge opportunity for Bhutan to actually create, instead of falling into the trap of a patrilineal mold that we see in the world around us, and therefore we feel to be modernized, to be accepted by the rest of the world, we need to also copy paste even traits of leadership. I feel we have the huge opportunity, given the strong matrilineal traditions we have. We have the opportunity to really create a matrilineal mold of leadership as well, so that we can groom our young boys and men in the future to be, to be more, caring, more compassionate, more, honest. These qualities that are more inherently female. I think these can be nurtured in boys, young boys and men, so that in the future, I think, not so long, not to find the future, I would say we can actually have a more balanced, mold of leadership. There's a good blend, the best of both worlds, as we say, the best of the patriarchal norms, best of the, matrilineal norms. We can actually blend. I think Bhutan has that environment, and I think that is a huge opportunity for us, because often when we do our leadership exercises and we look for traits, I think most of the time the kind of traits that we look in leaders, whether they are men or women, I think most of the traits are very inherently there naturally in women. Whether it is you want a caring, you want a honest, you want a very responsible, the characteristics that are there in women, I think naturally, I think these are things that can be nurtured in men as well. So I think we have a huge opportunity in that, I would say, for
Yes.
nurturing, for really shaping and nurturing a feminine mold of leadership.
Yes. Thank you so much, Amfinsok. I think that's really beautiful and such a unique opportunity for Bhutan. Dr. Klein had actually asked about women-related studies. I wanted to answer this and save it for the end and say, we don't have gender studies in Bhutan or in the education curriculum, but this is an opportunity for our Ministry of Education to explore, I think, and then to add women, to make women more visible in the curriculum, and then to make it more acceptable, and then something to aspire towards, I think, from a young age. And also going back to the question about strong women leaders are we accepting? I want to actually attest to what Phinsuk has shared. We are a flexible society open to change. I want to give you one example of women playing kuru. Now, kuru is a traditional game of darts in Bhutan. When women first started playing that, there was hue and cry all over the country. If there were hailstones or a hailstorm, they would blame it on the women playing the darts. If something went awry in nature, even the women were blamed because they said we were going against the force of nature. But guess what? Just last month in our neighborhood, there was a huge group of men and women playing darts together. And when they saw me, they said, can you not put it on social media though? And the women were winning at the game. And the men said, we want these women on my team. So imagine this happened within the span of 3 years. So change can really happen. And there's so much opportunity for Bhutan. And on that note, I want to close the panel and thank all our panelists for your time tonight. And I want to hand over to Dr. Klein, who is the head of the regional office in South Asia.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, Excellencies, parliamentarians, and dear ladies and gentlemen, for this really very good, deep, and insightful discussion. Thanks especially to all our panelists, Ms. Aung Sonam Wangmo, Mrs. Aung Wanchuk Choden, Mrs. Chering Dolka, and to our excellent moderator, Mrs. Namgai Sam. Thanks, of course, also to you, Dr. Hartz, Vice President of the German Bhutan Himalaya Society, for your continuous support. Yeah, I think we had and witnessed just a very good discussion. And we in Friedrich Naumann Stiftung believe that everywhere in the world there is still a lot of room for entrusting women with the responsibilities they deserve in all facets of life, but also in our societies as a whole. So again, thank you very much for the discussion. I could proudly share with you that also in our foundation, we witness a new chapter. We just see that in the first time of our history, we have now a woman as the CEO in place. So we are very, very happy to have her with us now. Thank you very much again, especially to the colleagues from the foundation, my dear colleagues, Mrs. Nupur Hasija, thanks to the colleagues in Bavaria, Mr. Schnierer and Mr. Sayons. Thank you for the communication support, Mrs. Mishra and Mr. Bresnik. Special thanks to Mrs. Kama Jordan, the alumnus of our foundation. And of course, in the name of Friedrich Naumann Foundation in South Asia, I could say very happily that we will continue this online series on Bhutan. And of course, we are very happy that we have already started concrete, active activities in Bhutan with our partner, Bhutan Media Foundation. So again, at the end, I would like to hand over these quite unique certificates of thank you to all of you. I deeply hope that we will see each other in person in Bhutan, in India, or in Germany in person. Thank you again for this late night discussion, at least for us here in South Asia. I wish to all of you a very good Christmas time, especially to the listeners in Germany and around the world. And have, of course, a very happy and prosperous and healthy new year 2022. Thanks a lot and good night from South Asia.